Hello, everybody. Today I'm so excited to welcome Gurjot Sidhu to our conversation. Gurjot is a well-known senior executive, worked in many different industries and happy entrepreneur. Gurjot, maybe let's start talking about your background before we dive into what chief marketing officers need to consider in the age of AI, which I think is a really fun topic to talk about.
Yes, thank you, Joyce, and thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here. Quickly, my background, currently I'm functioning as an outsourced chief digital officer for private equity-backed companies. I focus a lot on companies in the luxury industry, but also companies in other industries as well, helping them really understand how they can use digital and technology to drive growth. Um, Previously in my career, I started out in management consulting. I worked as an entrepreneur for some time. I ran a clothing line, a luxury business wear line that I started in New York for about 10 years. And then from there, I worked at Deloitte, where I was part of the marketing transformation practice, working with Fortune 500 companies on all the amazing things around leveraging technology to drive marketing and customer experience. And then after that, I was the global head of digital marketing at CBRE, where I had a global remit, launched 55 websites globally, and was deep in the work around driving customer engagement and customer experience to build revenue for the company.
That's amazing, Joe, and it's such a multifaceted career. I think you're in a best position to talk about uh, chief marketing officers thinking about how do we leverage new technologies or increasingly more advanced technology like AI and be really close to that voice of the customer. So in this kind of big theme about what does a CMO need to do to drive customer experience, how would you sort of frame that? How should people think about that question?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Joyce. And I think about it kind of along kind of three buckets, you could say. One is making sure that the CMO has the foundation right. And by foundation, I mean around, the best practices that all CMOs like to follow around making sure we're meeting the business goals, making sure that we have strong internal partnership to drive outcomes and dealing with the fact that quite often data and teams are siloed. And to be successful in AI, we need that to not be the case. So there's a lot of foundational groundwork that needs to be done to set yourself up for success to leverage AI. And then there's things that can be done with AI, and I kind of put them into two buckets. One, efficiency gains. We hear a lot about those things, just cutting the time in half of what it takes to get something done. And then I also like to think about value creation, where there's tremendous opportunity there. And that's really about using the technology well in a way that's tailored to your organization, to create new value opportunities. So we can talk about some of those ideas too.
That's great. So maybe you start with a foundation about, well, if you don't have the foundation, you can't do all the fancy stuff. And so from this perspective of, the chief marketing officers have to work across different functional areas. You talk about data, you talk about this AI ready foundation. Can you elaborate a little bit more about this idea and this set of practices or thinking?
Sure. Yeah. So the foundation is just critical, and it's almost like a litmus test that CMOs can apply to their own organization to see, where are they on the maturity scale of certain things. So, one in the area of technology and data, to use AI well, we do need some sort of centralized source of data, whether it's customer data, transactional data, feedback from customers, whatever it might be. And we need to be able to access that data. So if it's hidden within the organization or not easily accessible, it's going to take time to make that, to surface that. So a CMO needs to kind of know what is my data situation and how easily accessible is it. And I would kind of broaden that data to be, it could be data on, from our CRM, like our basic client information and how is our sales team engaging with them. It could be data from the website. How are those customers coming to the site? What parts of the site are they most interested in? transactional data, on and on. So, and often that data is in many different places within an organization. So it's good to know where you are with your data, and then that can help you decide what pieces of AI you want to leverage. And then in terms of partnership, the CMO's job is to drive revenue, build a brand and drive revenue. At least that's how I'm defining it these days. It could have been more focused on brand building, call it 20 years ago, but now, the CMO has a seat at the table as a partner to the business to help drive revenue strategically. And what that means is to achieve that, the CMO then needs partnership with many other leaders within the organization. So the head of sales, the head of IT, head of digital, head of product who might be reporting to the CMO. But, the leaders need to be able to work together to partner to drive an outcome, especially when new technologies like AI and generative AI are coming into play. They're just demanding more of us as a team. And so when I think about another important foundational piece, the CMO always wants to have partnership with these leaders, but when it comes to leveraging AI and generative AI, it's even more important to have that partnership, ability to have easy conversations with these leaders, to define use cases together and set goals together so that we can all pursue using this technology together and win together.
I think that is so important. And I love what you said so simply, but it's so important is what is the data situation? It's this, you're speaking the chief data officer's language, but to a point in the current age, it's not just about building brand, it's driving revenue. And if we want to leverage this technology, we want to know about data. And you actually talked about one of the big challenges in enterprise organizations is siloed data and perhaps siloed teams, which exist in a lot of organizations. And I like how you bring all those different elements together. Any advice for head of marketing and even other functional leaders as they think about this question as to what is their data situation because they have to get their data perhaps de-siloed or more clean in order for the marketing team to be able to take full advantage of those data assets.
Yeah, one piece of advice I often give my CMOs is to feel confident to have a strong point of view on the data that you need. I think often what happens, and it's just the way business has evolved, and because a lot of this technology is new, the data decisions have stayed within the IT area or chief digital area, and they don't always cross over into the chief marketing area. So it's kind of like the CMO might be waiting to hear from the CTO or the head of, engineering, like, what is our situation? What do I have access to? What do I have access to? And the answer could be very little, so that isn't a helpful question. Really, I think the question that CMOs can pose is, here's what needs to be true for me to be successful, engaging with the customer in this way. I need to be able to understand the full details of our CRM. I need to be able to understand all of the touch points that we have with our clients. I need to be able to link that to my website, so feel confident to put forward a use case that the CMO knows is critical to their success. And then again, build partnership. Partnership is everything. Everyone has their own responsibilities within an organization. Nobody's really thinking about if I'm the CMO, what I need. The head of sales is thinking about what she needs. The head of digital is thinking about what she needs. I'm thinking about what I need as a CMO. So it behooves us to put our case forward to others, and then find a way to find common ground. Because at the end of the day, we all work for one company and we're all striving to achieve the same high level goal, which is to build business, to retain customers, to attract new customers, all of those things. So I think it's very important for CMOs to give themselves some time to think about what is my thesis, what do I need from a data perspective? And if I'm not, knowledgeable on this topic, let me reach out to partners in the company and start to become knowledgeable and develop a point of view, and then partner with other leaders to start building in the direction of getting access to that data.
Yeah, excellent. And I think that also um, uh, go very well with this sort of the current state of AI. It's very fragmented. You have so many different solutions, especially Gen AI. It seems like every other day there's a new solution that could work for the CMO and the marketing team. And so your point about partnership and collaboration, working together, is also very important from that lens as well. So let's talk about that. So you have all these really interesting and cool tools in the AI stack for marketing professionals. And there is sort of this uh, kind of school of thoughts, or people talking about, well, marketing, it's getting disintermediated because all these generative tools. How should CMOs and leaders navigate this world right now?
Yeah, and it's a big question. And I come back to those two buckets, like thinking about gains from an efficiency perspective and thinking about gains from a value creation perspective. So, and kind of like the high level overarching perspective is how can we use these tools to shift the work of our teams from call it day-to-day repetitive tasks in some cases, to space to be more strategic, to focus more on the customer, more on creative storytelling, and things like that. So when we look at it from that perspective, from an efficiency point of view, there's so many ways to use AI to basically cut the time that you spend on things by 50%. Let's just, simplify it, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of what marketing is involved in is content creation. So product descriptions, articles, website content, and generative AI is an amazing tool to use as a thought starter, as a thought partner, to build content that, it may not be the deepest, most analytical content, but it's basic content that we need to have available for different channels. And so that, doing a pilot, most companies should be out of pilot stage by now, in my opinion. But if you're just getting started, do a pilot around content creation. And it's not replacing individuals, it's shifting the focus of their work to like higher order, things where they can, you know, get some ideas from Gen AI and workshop it, workshop it as a team, improve it. Marketing is science and it's also craft. And Gen AI doesn't have that craft yet, even though, people might say it does, it doesn't. So there is that human perspective that's really required to bring kind of the magic and the special touch to the messaging. But certainly, when you think about the number of campaigns that need to be created or the amount of content that needs to be created, even in a month within a marketing organization, it's huge. Or the amount of content that needs to be updated. That's certainly something that generative AI is like a super easy tool to use to facilitate that process. Um, and, with everything comes change management. And this goes hand in hand with working with your senior level partners. There's change management that comes, that's needed there too. But even with team members, really investing in them, helping them learn AI and generative AI, and then helping them use the tool, right? It's not, it has to be a step-by-step process that really involves the individual so that they can really become fluent, in using it just like we use, Microsoft Word today. And then I would say just quickly on the value creation side, where I think there's larger, I would say equally large impact opportunities there. So on the efficiency side, CMOs are always being asked to cut budget here and there, right? That's always a question. How can you save? This is a great place to save, save on costs by becoming more efficient in your production. And on the value creation side, people don't ask about that a lot, but it can be a pleasant surprise that a CMO can offer her CEO to say, hey, we decided to use these Gen AI tools in a way that's really creating value for our organization. So one example there is really leveraging the capability, going beyond the chat functionality, but leveraging the capability of the large language models and of having agents work on your behalf. So an example of value creation, which a CMO could pilot or test, is to do something like this, build an internal LLM, train it, put your brand playbook in there, put your whole strategy in there, put your goals for the year in there, so that, that LLM can really understand the tone, the voice, the messaging, the positioning, and the goals for the year. And then have it help you generate what your campaign should look like for the year across channels. And use that as a super helpful thought starter and way to iterate, because as marketers, we are looking to have impact across all channels. And I know the majority of spend goes to digital these days. It makes sense. But there is a place when you're thinking about from going from brand building and using a brand to drive demand, there's a place for TV, there's a place for print, there's a place for direct mail, an important place. So, building an in-house LLM that is just learning about your company and your value propositions and being a really strong thought partner to you and creating options for you to evaluate for the year and lining that up against the business goals that you have and the audiences, put in your audience segmentation as well, whatever you know about your customers. Really use that as a powerful, that becomes almost like Joyce, like customized software that you've just built for your company.
Yeah.
So that's a really powerful way to think about value creation.
I love how you put this into these two very clear buckets and really giving specific use cases. I think for the non-marketers, people think about, marketing sort of like a point solution. Here's a thing for social, here's a thing for this channel, for this type of customer. But you really paint the picture of a role of a CMO, which is like actually very complicated. You're talking about multiple channels, scale across the world, different customer segments. You you are looking for more powerful sort of assistant that is driven by AI technology to help with this value added work while using it also to kind of drive efficiency in some of the repetitive tasks and things that you already had the desire to figure out how to make it more efficient.
Very true. Very true. And I think, just taking that data perspective even further, there's a way for LLMs, like in that value creation category, to solve for the siloed data problem. And what I mean by that is there's a way that you can build an agent, within, generative AI to go to your various siloed data locations and pull data and bring it together into your LLM to analyze. So in a way, it allows you to leapfrog over the traditional IT issue, which is if we go back to the foundation, say my CRM data is separate from my website data, is separate from my social media data. It takes effort on the part of IT and the software engineers to integrate all that, at least get everything into a data warehouse. There's going to be some effort required, which might take time. Now, you could kind of leapfrog that by doing a use case with generative AI and build your LLM. Obviously, you need your engineers to help you with that, but the agents can go out and just cherry pick the data you need and bring it back to you. So then instead of it taking 6 to 9 months for IT to integrate all this technology, say within 2 months, you've got data being pulled and you're acting on that data. So that's a real value add to an organization to kind of use the tool in that way.
I hope all the entrepreneurs and folks who are building Gen AI stuff are listening to this because you're giving them a lot of great use cases. So on one side, like today we have these amazing technologies, but a huge part of what you talked about is the human element. It's the leadership element. And none of these things can happen without an effective leader, isn't it? And so how do you think about sort of the role of CMO is evolving? I mean, I think you touched on a lot of those elements already, including AI literacy and really working with a team to help them to get up to speed. But talk a little bit more about leadership, senior leadership in the age of AI and looking forward beyond what we know today.
Yeah, I mean, my point of view on that is that CMO, the role of the CMO is evolving, or the expectation of the skill set of the CMO is evolving. And in my opinion, what the CMO should be achieving should also evolve. And what I mean by that is we're shifting from a world where it was maybe harder to measure impact. That's always been like a big question. Like, how much should we be spending on marketing? Like, are we getting the ROI that we're looking for? What is the ROI? There are some parts of marketing, call it TV or other parts of advertising, where it's just difficult to quantify. Obviously, with social and paid media, it's very easy to quantify because there's whole agencies out there that measure all of this with Meta and report it back to us, right? We're watching every penny there. But big picture, um, from a leadership perspective, I think CMOs should just expect to have a seat at the table together with the other C-suite of an organization and be an equal partner in defining business strategy and helping drive revenue. Because one thing that we know now that we have all this marketing technology, and I'll put AI in that category, we can measure so much more. And I think not only can we measure and say, here's the value marketing is bringing to the table, I think companies are starting to understand today how important brand is and the power of brand. And with AI tools, sure, we can run campaigns night and day. We can have agents building campaigns for us. But without brand tied to that, we're going nowhere. We're just in a sea of sameness. So I think it's important for CMOs to bring that magic that they bring of knowing how to create a brand. What are the elements of a brand that, make people remember the brand when that product is not in the room with them? And how does that brand, drive aspiration and drive people to want to be a part of, the brand itself and buy the product? Those things are very powerful. And I think now that there's a little bit of sea of sameness with all these technology capabilities that companies have, and maybe people are marketing in the same way, we're all out there on social. But I think the CMO can both show up with measurable results from some of the marketing activities and continue to influence people's thinking and understanding the power of a strong brand and what it means to invest in that. And I think finally, we are much more able today to measure, like, from brand to demand is what I call it. Like, how do we convey that the millions that we spent on building this brand, we're recouping now that we're in the demand stage and really driving customers to the product, So the role is very powerful, and I think that I think CMOs need to assert themselves and take that position on the chess board, or whatever you want to call it, because it's very easy for organizations to minimize or dismiss just because they're not seeing things the way marketers are seeing them, or the way digital marketers are seeing them, and not really fully understanding the power of being able to create a brand and get the word out there and then measure the impact of the results that we're creating.
I love that. You have so many amazing things, I think, from what you even just said. This idea of like sea of sameness. And I think it's totally true coming from AI technology perspective. Everybody could have the same tools. Is how do you actually apply that? How do you apply that in the right way? Surpass the competitive landscape and not just use it sort of generically and apply that sophistication under the right leadership in guiding the team to use it. So I love that. I also love what you said about brand to demand, and then going back to these foundational elements to set the organization up and to allow the CMO to, which I agree, to have a seat at the table and really bring those customer insights and drive revenue to
Yeah.
to the organization.
And I would add, if you don't mind, one other thought on the leadership front, Joyce, is that It's not just the CMO asserting themselves, it's the benefit to the other C-suite too. Like the
Yeah.
chief sales officer, the chief commercial officer, it's not their job to know marketing. It's their job to know the business and know operations and understand the margins. So, what I've seen is the companies where the leaders actually really partner well together, they make, percentage wise, call it 20% more revenue minimum, because of the synergies that get created, and it's kind of the mutual respect of, sales has this role. They know the customer inside and out. Marketing doesn't need to be there every step of the way, but they need to understand all that information so that they can feed it into the messaging that they're creating. Similarly, with chief technology officer, technology is so, so critical to every part of business today. Having strong partnership with your CTO to understand how are they thinking about the organization's tech stack, the architecture, there's, security, governance, all of those things. It's important for us as marketers to understand that, but also help guide the conversation to the technology choices that we know are going to be most impactful for us. So it's truly partnership across.
Yeah. Excellent. I think it's so exciting, in the current age, and as you sort of talked about what it looks like and the opportunities for chief marketing officers. Last question, if you had to advise a global brand about marketing AI, what are some of the initial questions you ask? I know one of the questions is like, what is the data situation? But any other top of mind things to really get the CEO and the board and other senior leaders to consider?
So, when I approach, call it a client, that's a global organization, I have a bit of a diagnostic that I take them through. And it's really around like, where are they on the maturity scale? And so, where are they when it comes to technology? Call it a 0 to 5, right? Are they early days, like very siloed data, or are they all the way over there to 5 and they have their data warehouse and they're operating at a very high level? So where are they in their data, as we talked about? Where are they in their organization, just in terms of skills, like people, are they fluent in the various areas of subject matter, marketing, technology, et cetera, or are they kind of, still learning? And then where is leadership in terms of partnership? And the fourth one is budget. What money do they have to spend, like realistically, on technology? And so when we look at all of those things, we can figure it out and say, okay, with this combination, if my data is kind of a 3 and my people are like a 3 to a 4 and my leadership is like, if everything is kind of at a 3 or better, essentially, then we're in a good spot to try to think about how to move forward in a way that's calibrated correctly for the organization. And then what we do is we just look at, what are your business objectives for the next 3 to 5 years? Are you super ambitious? Are you looking to double revenue in the next 2 years? Okay, well, if you're at a 3 with technology, we're going to need to invest and scale up. If you're at a 3 with people, the same. But maybe you're at a steady state, and what you're really looking to do is focus on retention. I want to get strong renewals with my clients. I'm not looking to acquire. Everyone's always looking to acquire, but maybe the focus is more on renewals. Well, that could be a more targeted technology slash marketing endeavor to say, well, what is that audience segment? And how can we use AI and generative AI to really double down with them and build a stronger relationship with them through all the channels that we have and the technology we can use? And, or if you're, just a huge, huge company that is much more steady state, then, to demonstrate value, usually it's a more targeted, like, let's pick an audience segment, or let's pick a specific business goal or sector where we want to show dominance. Maybe we want to be known in the healthcare, sector in a certain way. Then you can maybe focus on broad messaging there. So it really, that was a super broad answer. I apologize, but that's kind of how I think about it, to kind of diagnose and then decide where to move forward using marketing and technology.
Yeah. I like that. It actually mapped very well with AI maturity. Kind of go hand in hand with what you talked about as those foundational elements, and you're looking at this, with your clients doing this diagnosis. So last question, you talk about brand, and brand is so important. We have like so many different brands in the world, and I think at least for me, it is really the CMO and the senior leader sort of job to kind of create that brand. And in the startup world, it's very hard for these startups to create brands, and for the larger companies to defend and to continue to be a store of the brand that for their audience. How do you think about brand building for iconic companies or companies that want to have a strong brand?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I think it's a combination of two things. It's with brand building, it's messaging and it's customer experience. And so, if you think of an iconic brand like Nike that's gone, up and down through the years, or Calvin Klein, pick any brand, right? Tiffany. Let's try Tiffany. So I happen to like jewelry. Um, so Tiffany, at one point, I mean, it's a well-known brand no matter what. But at one point, call it 15 years ago, they were viewed as your mom's jewelry store, like 10, 15, 20 years ago. The younger segment wasn't shopping there. And they were able to refresh their brand by bringing on influencers they would do campaigns with, younger pop singers and artists, and create buzz with that partnership. And then when you know it, all the high school girls now wanted to get a $200 necklace or whatever the case may be. And they've managed to then also, so they attracted that audience segment, and have held on to it while also then, introducing, Pharrell Williams has designed a very high-end line for Tiffany, which is speaking to a very different woman, a very different part of the audience. So they've been able to use this brand in such a broad way. And now with LVMH acquiring them, I'm sure they're going to do even more. But at the end of the day, it's the messaging and the experience coupled with the experience. So they have changed their messaging over time to attract different audiences, but then the experience has to deliver on that. So if I am the mom of that high school girl, which I was, going to Tiffany to buy a special gift for my daughter, I wanted myself and my daughter to have that amazing Tiffany experience. That's part of what I'm buying. Similarly, if I'm going to the store or have a private appointment to buy the higher end line, I want to have that experience. And if the company falls down in either of those areas, you're not building the brand. The brand will stumble, so the messaging has to be really clear and strong and really resonate with whichever audience you're targeting. But then the experience has to meet or, if not exceed, that messaging for it to stick. And that's how I think about brand building.
I love that. I feel like, Joe, I just got a master class in marketing in about 30 minutes, going from AI all the way to building brand. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and perspective with us today. And you bring so much knowledge to this. And again, thank you for this wonderful conversation.
Thank you for having me.